when my boss grabbed my 200-page financial dossier, tossed it carelessly into the boardroom trash can, and told me to pack my desk. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice, and I certainly did not beg for my job. I just stood there, breathing evenly, letting the suffocating silence of the glass-walled executive boardroom wash over me. My name is Victoria. I am 33 years old, an African-American woman who has spent the last decade navigating the cutthroat, male-dominated world of corporate finance. If you have ever poured your blood, sweat, and tears into a massive project only to have a toxic manager try to use you as a human shield for his own failures, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because you are going to want to hear exactly how this arrogant executive ended up in handcuffs before his morning coffee even went cold. As I was saying, Vice President Marcus announced, his booming voice shattering the quiet. He adjusted his expensive silk tie and offered a blinding, utterly fake smile to the 12 executives sitting around the polished mahogany table. We won't be needing the junior analyst's input today. Unfortunately, Victoria has been struggling with the basic data models. I've caught several alarming discrepancies in her recent reports. To protect the integrity of this $500 million merger, I'm letting her go, effective immediately. I stood perfectly still at the front of the room, my presentation clicker still resting lightly in my palm. Across the table sat the acquisition team from Sterling Holdings, the massive conglomerate preparing to buy our tech firm. The lead investor, a stern older man named Jonathan Sterling, raised an eyebrow but remained completely silent. Marcus was executing a classic corporate ambush. He was firing me publicly, in front of the most important clients in our company's history, to establish himself as a ruthless, uncompromising leader. He expected me to crumble, to burst into tears, or to run out of the room in absolute humiliation. Instead, I gave him a slow, chillingly calm smile. To understand the sheer audacity of Marcus's betrayal, you have to understand the hell I had endured over the past 6 months. When I first joined Vanguard Tech as a senior data analyst, I was immediately tasked with preparing the due diligence reports for this exact merger. I worked 80-hour weeks. I sacrificed my weekends, my sleep, and my personal life to build a flawless, bulletproof valuation model. Marcus, a 40-something executive who spent more time on the golf course than in the office, had absolutely no idea how the financial backend of his own division operated. He survived purely on unearned confidence and a terrifying talent for stealing other people's work. But he didn't act alone. Sitting right next to him at the mahogany table was Chloe, his 26-year-old newly promoted strategic director. Chloe was fiercely loyal to Marcus because he handed her promotion she didn't earn, for months. The two of them had been systematically locking me out of crucial email chains, taking my spreadsheets, changing the fonts, and presenting my deep dive analytics to the executive board as their own brilliant strategies. Right now, Chloe was sitting in her plush leather chair, barely hiding a triumphant smirk. She casually flipped her perfectly styled hair over her shoulder and pulled a sleek, freshly bound folder from her briefcase. "Don't worry, Mr. Sterling," Chloe said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Marcus and I worked late into the night to fix the glaring errors Victoria made in the operational budget. We have the corrected, finalized valuation right here for your review." I looked at the folder in Chloe's hands. I knew exactly what was inside it. It wasn't a corrected valuation. It was a complete fabrication. Over the past 3 weeks, Marcus had been quietly doctoring the revenue projections, inflating the quarterly profits to hide a massive $2 million deficit in his departmental budget. He was terrified the buyers would discover the missing money before the ink dried on the contract. He needed a scapegoat. He needed a disposable employee to blame for the accounting errors. I was his chosen sacrifice. "Please, Victoria, stop wasting everyone's valuable time." Marcus sneered, gesturing dismissively toward the heavy glass doors. Leave your company laptop on the podium and exit the building. Security has already been notified to escort you out. I will not allow your incompetence to derail this historic partnership." The executives from Sterling Holdings shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Terminating an employee mid-presentation was an incredibly unprofessional move, but in the ruthless world of corporate mergers, results often outranked basic human decency. They were waiting to see how I would react. They expected the stereotypical display of anger, a shouted defense, a dramatic exit, or desperate pleading. I gave them nothing. I slowly placed the presentation clicker on the podium. The soft click echoed loudly in the tense room. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out my personal tablet, and powered down the company laptop. My movements were slow, deliberate, and entirely devoid of panic. I operated with the absolute precision of a woman who knew exactly how the next 30 minutes of her life were going to unfold. I looked directly at Chloe, whose smug smile faltered just a fraction when she realized I wasn't crying. Then, I shifted my gaze to Marcus. His face was flushed with the thrill of his own perceived power. He genuinely believed he had won. He believed that by destroying my reputation, he had permanently buried his own financial crimes. "I will leave the laptop," I said, my voice smooth, steady, and completely unbothered. "But before I go, Marcus, I strongly suggest you review the exact numbers Chloe is about to hand to Mr. Sterling. Sometimes, hastily edited spreadsheets contain fatal errors." Marcus's eyes widened for a split second, a flash of genuine panic piercing through his arrogant facade. But he quickly recovered, masking his fear with loud, aggressive bluster. He wasn't going to back down now. He had committed to the lie, and he was ready to ride it all the way to a $5 million acquisition bonus. "Are you threatening me?" Marcus barked, his face turning an angry shade of crimson. He slammed his hand flat against the mahogany table, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. "You are completely delusional. Victoria, you doctor reports, you fail to meet basic deadlines, and now you have the audacity to stand in this boardroom and throw accusations. I will make one phone call and ensure you never work in corporate finance again. I will have you blacklisted from coast to coast. John. Security should be here any second." Chloe chimed in, leaning closer to Marcus, playing the role of the loyal deputy. She slid the forged financial dossier directly in front of Jonathan Sterling. "Please accept our deepest apologies for this unprofessional display. Mr. Sterling, Marcus has always been too lenient with underperforming staff. It's a testament to his kind heart." I almost laughed out loud at the sheer absurdity of her statement. A kind heart. Marcus had spent the last year mentally terrorizing his entire department, firing anyone who dared to question his missing budgets. "I don't need security," I said calmly, zipping my tote bag closed. I slipped the strap over my shoulder and took a slow, measured step away from the podium. "I am perfectly capable of finding the exit." I began the long walk down the length of the boardroom. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of my heels, making the room feel eerily quiet. Every single pair of eyes was glued to me. I kept my posture perfect, my chin high, radiating an aura of total, unshakable control. I could feel Marcus glaring at my back, mentally pushing me toward the door, desperate for me to leave so he could finalize his massive fraud. He needed my presence gone so his lie could become the official corporate reality. I reached the heavy glass doors and placed my hand on the stainless steel handle. "Now that the distraction has been handled," Marcus said, his voice instantly dropping back into a smooth, practiced corporate purr. "Let's turn our attention to the final acquisition documents. Mr. Sterling, if you look at page 4 of the new dossier, you will see that our Q3 operational margins have actually exceeded the initial projections by 12%. I paused at the door, keeping my hand on the handle. I didn't push it open. I slowly turned my head and looked back at the table. Jonathan Sterling, the silver-haired billionaire who held the fate of the entire company in his hands, was quietly putting on his reading glasses. He picked up the heavy gold pen resting beside his notepad. He opened the folder Chloe had given him. The atmosphere in the room shifted from tense conflict to high-stakes anticipation. This was it. The $500 million moment. If Sterling signed the preliminary approval based on those numbers, the merger would proceed. Marcus would get his massive payout, and I would be left completely ruined, facing potential legal action for the missing money he planned to pin on me. The numbers look remarkably strong. Marcus, Sterling murmured, his eyes scanning the freshly printed spreadsheet. Almost impossibly strong, considering the market downturn last month. That is the result of aggressive, visionary leadership, sir. Marcus replied smoothly, practically vibrating with excitement. We trimmed the fat. We optimized our logistical output. I personally oversaw every single data point on that page. Sterling hovered his gold pen over the signature line of the term sheet. Chloe was holding her breath. Marcus was grinning so hard he looked like he might actually crack a tooth. They were 3 seconds away from pulling off the greatest corporate heist of their miserable careers. I let go of the door handle. Mr. Sterling, my voice rang out, sharp and crystal clear, cutting through the heavy silence of the boardroom like a perfectly thrown knife. The gold pen stopped moving. Sterling looked up over the rim of his glasses. Marcus whipped his head around, his face instantly twisting into a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. I told you to leave, Marcus roared, abandoning his polished persona entirely. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Get out of this room right now before I have you physically thrown into the street. I ignored Marcus completely. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes locked entirely on the billionaire sitting at the center of the table. Before you sign that document, Mr. Sterling, I highly recommend you ask Vice President Marcus to explain the $2 million discrepancy in the offshore vendor accounts, specifically line item 42 on page 18 of that folder. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Chloe's face drained of all color, turning a sickening shade of gray. Marcus stood up so fast his heavy leather chair tipped backward and crashed into the glass wall behind him. She is lying, Marcus shouted, panic bleeding into his voice. He reached across the table, desperately trying to pull the folder away from Sterling. She is a bitter, fired employee trying to sabotage a deal because she couldn't handle the job. Don't listen to a single word she says. But Sterling didn't let go of the folder. Instead, the older man placed his hand firmly over the document, pinning it to the mahogany table. He looked at Marcus, his expression completely unreadable, and then he looked back at me. Line item 42, Sterling asked, his voice low and commanding. Yes, sir, I replied, taking a slow step back toward the table. The vendor payments routed through the Cayman Logistics account, the ones that don't actually match any physical freight receipts. Security, Marcus screamed, his voice cracking hysterically. Where the hell is security? Get this lunatic out of my boardroom. Sit down, Marcus, Sterling commanded. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice, but the absolute authority in his tone hit the room like a physical shockwave. Marcus froze. He looked at the billionaire, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He slowly righted his chair and sank into it, his expensive suit suddenly looking 3 sizes too big. Sterling turned the pages of the dossier, his eyes scanning the numbers until he reached page 18. He stared at the spreadsheet for a long, agonizing moment. There are no Cayman Logistics accounts listed here. Victoria. Line item 42 simply shows a standard domestic software licensing fee. Chloe let out a loud, shaky breath of relief. Like we said, Mr. Sterling, she is completely delusional. She doesn't even know what is in the report. I smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. That is because Marcus and Chloe deleted the Cayman accounts from that specific folder at 2:14 a.m. last night, I explained calmly, walking fully back into the center of the room. They replaced the $2 million offshore wire transfers with a fabricated domestic software fee to balance the bottom line. It's a very clever formatting trick, but unfortunately, it leaves a digital footprint in the server's backup cache. This is slander. Marcus gasped, sweat beading on his forehead. You have absolutely no proof of this. You are making up wild conspiracy theories to ruin my career. Am I asked softly. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out my personal tablet. I tapped the screen 3 times. Above us, the massive boardroom projector, which was still connected to the room's wireless network, suddenly flared to life. I didn't need the company laptop. I had completely bypassed their internal security. The massive screen illuminated, casting a harsh blue light across Marcus's terrified face. A collective gasp rippled through the 12 executives sitting at the table. Displayed on the screen was a split-pane view. On the left was the exact spreadsheet Marcus had just handed to Sterling, the doctored numbers, the fake software fees, the perfect profit margins. On the right was the raw, unaltered data pulled directly from the deepest encrypted layers of Vanguard Tech's financial servers, and highlighted in bright. Glaring red on the right side was exactly what I had promised. 2.1 million in unauthorized wire transfers sent to a shadow LLC registered in the Cayman Islands, an LLC owned entirely by Marcus. What is this? Chloe whispered, her hand shaking so violently she dropped her pen. How did you get access to the encrypted root servers? You're just a junior analyst. You don't have level 5 security clearance. You hacked us, Marcus stated, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and sudden desperate hope. He looked at Sterling. Do you see this? She committed a federal cybercrime. She hacked our mainframe to plant fake evidence. We need to call the police immediately. Sterling didn't look at the screen. He closed the forged dossier, removed his reading glasses, and folded his hands neatly on the mahogany table. He looked at me, a tiny, knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. She didn't hack anything, Marcus, Sterling said softly. The billionaire leaned forward, the casual demeanor vanishing, replaced by the lethal intensity of a corporate predator who had just trapped his prey. She didn't need to hack your servers. She already had the master access keys. In fact, she has higher security clearance in this building than your own CEO. The room plummeted into absolute silence. Marcus stared at Sterling, his brain completely short-circuiting. I don't understand. Allow me to introduce you to the woman you just tried to fire, Sterling said, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet boardroom. This is Victoria. She is not a junior analyst. She is the lead forensic investigator for the Sterling Holdings Board of Directors. Chloe let out a sharp, choked gasp. Marcus physically recoiled as if he had been slapped across the face. When Vanguard Tech proposed this $500 million merger 6 months ago, Sterling continued, our board caught wind of some irregularities in your division's spending. We don't invest $500 million based on blind trust. So, we required your CEO to allow us to embed an independent auditor into your team. Victoria has been working quietly inside your department, compiling a massive, devastatingly accurate dossier of your daily operations. I stepped forward, no longer playing the role of the quiet, submissive employee. I stood tall, radiating the absolute authority of a woman holding all the cards. I have spent the last 6 months watching you steal my work, Marcus, I said, my voice cold and uncompromising. I let you and Chloe take the credit. I let you rewrite the reports. I deliberately played the role of the weak, disposable analyst because I needed you to feel comfortable enough to make a fatal mistake. I needed you to think you could get away with embezzling $2 million. And last night, when you initiated that offshore wire transfer and doctored the final acquisition report, You finally gave me the irrefutable proof I needed. I tapped my tablet one last time. The projector screen shifted, displaying a highly confidential email chain between Marcus and Chloe, outlining exactly how they planned to frame me for the missing funds if the audit ever caught up with them. The evidence was absolute. It was undeniable. Marcus collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The arrogant, untouchable executive had been completely broken in less than 10 minutes. Chloe was openly weeping, desperately trying to apologize to Sterling, claiming Marcus had forced her to participate in the fraud. "The merger is officially dead," Sterling announced, standing up from the table. He looked down at Marcus with absolute disgust. "My legal team is currently downstairs in the lobby with federal authorities. We are handing over Victoria's complete investigative dossier. You are not getting a $5 million bonus. Marcus, you are going to federal prison for corporate fraud and embezzlement." Right on cue, the heavy glass boardroom doors swung open. But it wasn't the company's security team Marcus had tried to summon. It was 2 federal agents in dark suits, holding a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. They marched directly toward Marcus, hauled him out of his leather chair, and read him his Miranda rights right there in front of the entire executive board. I watched calmly as they marched my former boss out of the room, his expensive silk tie hanging loose, his reputation entirely destroyed. Chloe was escorted out right behind him, crying uncontrollably as the reality of her shattered career set in. I walked over to the mahogany table, picked up the forged dossier, and dropped it directly into the boardroom trash can right where Marcus had thrown my work just 30 minutes prior. Sterling turned to me, offering a respectful nod. "Excellent work, Victoria," the billionaire said. "Let's head back to headquarters. We have a new acquisition target to find." I smiled, grabbed my tote bag, and walked out of the glass room, leaving the ashes of Marcus's empire behind me. Never mistake a woman's silence for compliance. Sometimes, we are just quietly gathering the rope you are going to use to hang yourself. If you've ever had to deal with a toxic manager who thought they were untouchable, how did you handle it? Did you confront them? Or did you quietly build your exit strategy? Let me know your best stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of absolute justice. I'll see you in the next one.